Brothers, as everyone continues coming in, I did want to introduce and welcome our representatives from Holmes Murphy, Rich Youngman and Carson Wiltfong, who will be presenting on how to mitigate risk as a house corporation.
Yeah. And I'm in computer science. So yeah, hard.
Oh, sorry. Am I good to share my screen here? Will I have access for that? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just do that while we're waiting here. Can you guys see that all right?
I can't see anything.
Oh, I need to hit share. My bad. There we go. Now, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Well, I'll get this kicked off, but thank you everybody for your time today, and thank you for allowing us to participate. I think it's great that the leadership of the house corporations are getting together and sharing ideas and seeing what's going on in the industry. I'm Rich Youngman. I'm the practice leader for the fraternal team with Holmes Murphy. And I'm here today with Carson Wiltfong, who is the client service consultant that works with me on Phi Gamma Delta. Let's change slides. And just a little background on who Holmes Murphy is. Obviously, we're part of a larger organization. Holmes Murphy has about 1,000 employees and 16 offices. But our team in Omaha of 24 specifically specializes in working with fraternities and sororities and other campus-based student organizations. We are Phi Gamma's broker and advocate. We don't work with any specific insurance company. We work for Phi Gamma Delta and trying to find the best options that exist in a very challenging market. We have a pretty wide umbrella of groups that we work with. And today we have over $35 million in written premium in this space. So we do a good deal of this and have been doing it since 1991. And we've also had the pleasure of serving Phi Gamma Delta since 1991. When we look at kind of the way that we look at and address risk in the lens and that we put it in, is we call it kind of an art more than it is a science to some degree. And what the art is basically an acronym for the A is for avoid, which is kind of really our first effort is to do whatever we can do to try to avoid risk so that it doesn't impact us. And then the second piece is obviously when and where we can't avoid it, we reduce it, reduce our exposure to it. We reduce the impact that potentially a claim has on the organization or a house corporation. And then the last piece is we work to transfer that risk. And the transfer piece of it is when we go out and we procure insurance that meets the needs of our clients. And so today we're really going to kind of base our discussion around that. And as opposed to talking about property claims, and kind of what you guys can do to reduce those, we really wanted today is to focus on liability. Over the last 5 years, we've had some really challenging losses with Phi Gamma, and it's really created a kind of an insurance crisis. And I know the international fraternity over this last year has made a lot of changes in regards to trying to better improve the health and safety of the experience of going and joining the fraternity and being a member of the fraternity. And it really takes all levels of the organization to be successful. And there's a lot that house corporations can do to try to mitigate some of the claims that are directly related to the premises, that chapter house.
Yeah, so as Rich had mentioned, and Rob had also alluded to it in his presentation just a little bit ago. You know, we've had some really challenging years, you know, on the liability side or the general liability side with Phi Gamma Delta, which has created some difficult renewals. So when we kind of break it down and when we look at, you know, what's driving those losses, we kind of look at it in two camps. The first is the frequency, is how often are these, you know, occurring, and then the severity is, you know, what's the severity of that dollar amount, or how much have we paid out in that claim. And so what this chart here is showing is throughout since 1999, since Phi Gamma Delta has been an insured with us, or a client of ours, we broke out the types of claims that we've had, and then, you know, that chart shows the frequency in purple and the severity in green. And so when we examine this, we kind of want to look at those peaks of, you know, where are these, you know, the current, or the things that are happening a lot, what are the things that are really hurting us as far as the dollar wise on claims. And so just kind of highlighting some of those, you know, we're seeing some high frequency on the salt and batteries, but the severity, you know, the payout on claim isn't quite there. But the next peak that we, you know, is very eye-opening, or something that we can be really proactive about as a house corporation, and, you know, being the ownership group of these houses, is the fall from height. You know, we're seeing a lot of those, and it's a lot of number of those, and we're seeing high payout claims or high severity claims in that. Another one, if we kind of go down the way a little bit, is slip and fall. We're seeing a large number of those as well. And that's something that we can be kind of proactive about as a house corporation, and we can be taking steps towards. And then the last one is kind of a unique one to Phi Gamma Delta. And I should back up a little bit. What we're seeing here with these trends is kind of mirrors the industry as far as fraternities go. There's a lot of similarities as far as frequency and severity goes, but the one that's really unique to Phi Gamma Delta is that water features. We've had some really costly claims as it relates to, you know, pools, slip and slides, you know, any of those water features. So we kind of want to get in a little bit here on these next slides of, you know, what can we be doing as a house corporation? What kind of avoidance, you know, when Rich talks about the art, what avoidance steps or what things can we do to mitigate some of those risks? So getting into kind of that fall from heights one that we're seeing high frequency and high severity of claims. Ultimately, it just comes down, a big preventative step is awareness. Awareness as a house corporation, looking for those things of, you know, where are we seeing increased exposure on our property and our chapter houses, and then, you know, after recognizing those exposures, communicating expectations to the chapters, and you know, being forceful or doing a good job of enforcing those expectations. If we're not communicating to those to our chapter members and setting, you know, here's our expectations of, you know, how we should use the fire escapes, or you know, we shouldn't be opening up windows, you know, farther than they need to be, you know, just setting clear and distinct expectations for our chapter members, or our members, and then enforcing those. And so some of those things, when we kind of dive deeper into those of what are kind of those drivers, or where are we seeing those fall from heights occurring, it's decks, fire escapes, lofted beds, you know, roofs. For some reason, we're seeing a lot of people, or a lot of young men, liking to, you know, wanting to climb up on the roofs, and then that's leading to a fall from height, and then falling from windows. So this slide kind of highlights some of those things that we can be doing specifically with both decks, you know, making sure that the railings are in good shape, making sure they're up to code. Also with all of these, you know, limiting access to any of, you know, fire escapes, you know, roofs, decks, you know, when we are having, you know, functions in the chapter house or events. You know, with fire escapes, making sure that they're used for only emergency use, they're properly maintained. With lofted beds, you know, we want to try to minimize the use of lofted beds if possible. We've seen some serious claims as far as the severity goes for members falling out of a bed, you know, whether they roll out or whatever. So something as simple as having a bed railing can be beneficial to mitigating some of those claims that are related to fall from heights. Again, I mentioned on roofs, you know, addressing it and setting up a clear expectation that, you know, roofs are off limits, and if there are ways to access the roof, making sure that those are locked and properly secured, so members or guests of members don't have easy access to that. And then the same goes for windows, limiting the ability to open, or if they do open, just enough to where there's not enough room for someone to fall out, ensuring screens are in place, and then, making sure beds are nowhere near close to those windows. So those are some of the areas of concern we see with fall from heights, and some of the kind of preventative steps that we can be taking as it relates to those. Kind of moving on to that slip and falls. And when we talk about anything with risk, and I alluded to it on the previous slide, is having top of mind awareness can be one of the most effective ways of managing risk. Looking for those areas of potential risk, looking for those signs of exposures, and then communicating those expectations. So when we look at the actual chapter houses themselves, and the exteriors, making sure that our walkways and sideways are clear, whether it's snow, ice, making sure that we get those things cleared away, that can go a long way with preventing a slip and fall. And that kind of goes into the upkeep and the maintenance of things, making sure that our sidewalks are clean, but when we're inside the house as well, making sure we're, making spills or cleaning up spills right away, using mats and preventative things to prevent, slippery floors. And when we do have some of the spills and slick, environments, is making sure we have those posted warning signs and alerts up that are available to chapter members to see. When we talk about the ingress and the egress, or kind of the entrance and exit ways to building, making sure that they're properly lighted can go a long way with, making sure nobody trips or slips. Again, clearing any hazards that could be in the way. And then making sure that we're having flooring types, that allow for grip for people to walk on, preventing those slippery floor surfaces, and then having limited access during social functions. So as kids are coming to and from events, that they're, that the right individuals are coming in and out, and limiting those to outsiders as well. So Rich, I don't know if you have any additional on kind of slips and falls, or the fall from heights, that I didn't touch on, but
Yeah, I not too much. Carson, you did a great job. Just on the fall from heights and those roof and ledge walking. I know that in a lot of campuses, this is a big challenge. And, all I can say is that it's very important that when there's awareness that this is happening, that measures are taken to stop it. And, if you're having problems with it, I mean, in all honesty, that's an issue of trespassing. And, it may have to be to where you get somebody involved in from that situation, because it is a type of claim to where we're seeing very much catastrophic type of injuries, traumatic brain injuries, para or quadriplegic type of injuries. And when we look at what are the valuations of those types of cases, they're really astronomical. So I think, for me, that's that one area that a house corporation could really have a significant impact. Is like one of our claims in that 5-year history involved a fall from heights, and it was probably in excess of a $3 million claim, between the expenses paid defending the house corporation and the other defendants to the ultimate settlement associated with that injury.
Okay, and then the last one that we wanted to touch on, that we think our house corporations can do a great job of helping to monitor and kind of help police, are these water features. And we have a couple examples that we've seen from claims here. And when we have water features, slip and slides, pools of that nature, that's inviting trouble, to be quite honest. I know our undergraduate members like to get creative with what they're doing and with their social functions, but when we implement water features, our likelihood of something happening, or our risk, goes drastically up. As I mentioned, it's water features invite trouble. And so we really want to try to eliminate any of those exposures, any of those risks associated with a water feature, if at all possible, or doing everything we can to making sure that our undergraduate members know that these are not acceptable, not welcome. Because again, you see that picture on the right, you see somebody jumping from that board there. I mean, it's easy ways, or or invites ways for students and our members or guests to injure themselves. So, and we've seen some high severity cases come out of water feature related claims. Just, very, very catastrophic injuries. So we want to make sure that these are things that are not, are around our chapters. So,
yeah. And the only thing I could add there is, a lot of times the students always say, well, it's for the ambiance of the party. It's just decorative. But lo and behold, somebody ultimately is intoxicated and, makes a really unwise decision to jump into that water. And again, this is the type of claims that are it's not death. It's, it's paraplegic, quadriplegic, very high severity, catastrophic type of claims that, again, the life care of a para or quad is very large. And I mean, the value of those claims go, just easily can show 25 to, $1 million or more in value. And not only that, the impact that it has on the family and the student. So, recognizing when in your social calendar, these things tend to pop up and, just being present and, again, recommunicating the expectations that these are not a part of our social functions. So just kind of going into, what's all this had on the impact of the insurance program. This is just what we call loss ratio. And a loss ratio, very simply, is the amount of claims paid on your behalf, whether that be settlements or attorneys defending lawsuits, divided by the premium that you pay in. And so this is how the insurance industry gauges profitability. And typically a loss ratio of 60 to 50% or less is where that's what's considered acceptable. And so just kind of showing you guys what we're dealing with today. In the prior 5 years, basically the insurance carriers paid out $2.56 for every dollar in premium collected. And this is just at the primary level, meaning that first $1 million. You can switch screen. And as a result of that, there's been a lot of changes that have occurred in the insurance program that we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of. After, basically we've dealt with 3 alcohol-related deaths in that period in a very large, not one death, 2 deaths and 1 significant injuries as a result of alcohol poisoning. But basically what's happened is that we could no longer find an excess liability market that was willing to underwrite Phi Gamma Delta. So ultimately the limit purchase was reduced from $4 million per occurrence to $1 million per occurrence today. In addition to that, there was $1 million per occurrence in aggregate sublimit for claims arising from hazing, abuse, and molestation, with supplementary payments being your defense costs is included in that sublimit. On all other types of claims, those defense costs are paid in addition into the limit. And previously, even those types of claims, the legal fees and such were paid in addition to that. That $1 million was just, or $1 million or $4 million was exclusively for indemnifying an injured party, i.e. whatever the settlement or jury verdict was. And so another change was too, is even though we still have those defense costs outside the limit, they are capping them at $1 million for all other claims other than those hazing, abuse, and molestation claims. So these are some pretty significant changes to the terms and conditions that ultimately do impact the housing corporation and the volunteers that run those at the local level. There is a solution to this, and if a house corporation would like additional limit, and we certainly don't want to make this a sales presentation at all, but we want to make you aware of what the changes are and what a potential solution is. And they're through the Fraternal Property Management Association, which many of the house corporations today by purchase property insurance. We offer a general liability and an excess liability option that we believe is an affordable option that can be, something that helps supplement what you're getting through the fraternities insurance program. The coverage highlights really are, this would be your coverage's own limit. With all these national insurance program, whatever limit's purchased is being shared, which means that everybody that's covered under that insurance policy, that is the limit that's being shared by those. So that could be the chapter, it could be the international fraternity, it could be the house corporation, it could be individual members or officers. This policy will provide coverage for an officer and director and other house corporation volunteers on a primary non-contributory basis, which means, we mitigate the impact that it would have on your own personal insurance. The expense, again, is outside in addition to the limit and not included. We are today, the most that we'll be able to provide through this program is $2 million per occurrence through the purchase of a primary general liability policy and an excess liability policy. And it does have a real low deductible of $2,500 per occurrence, which only applies to indemnity. And typically you're going to be looking at, somewhere between $5,000 for the $1 million and probably $8,000 to $9,000 for the 2 million. We are in the process of going through a renewal on that program. And I know I had a question pop up, which I'm going to Mike SPAC asked. So are we more personally exposed as house corporation officers? One thing I will say is the only time that I've ever seen a house corporation officer personally contribute toward the settlement of a claim was when they were actively involved in kind of the wrongdoing, the hazing and things like that. So, my guess is that, we don't see a lot of house corporation officers get sued individually. When we do, their settlement, and dismissal of the lawsuits included in any settlement that would ultimately be reached. But certainly as less insurance coverage is available, it's something that you have to be mindful of. And I guess one thing I will say is that we're seeing individual members, the undergraduate members, being named and sued and brought into this litigation more than ever before. But that's a good question, Mike. Any other questions?
Rich, looks like we had a couple more come up in the chat.
Okay.
What is the claims mix between brothers versus guests?
That's a great question. So about, historically what we've seen, about 60% of our liability claims are filed by our own members, and the most significant, the higher value types of claims are almost exclusively in that bucket of, it's either an associate member, new member, or a member that's brought that claim.
And then the next one is, can a university require coverage levels for fraternities to remain active?
They do.
A lot of campuses, we see
Yep.
university relationship agreements or other sorts of agreements that in order to be in compliance and to operate on that campus, university requires a certain level of coverage to be in place. So
yeah, and what we typically see and what's pretty standard is $1 million, $2 million. There certainly have been campuses in the past that have asked for more. And, just the availability of excess liability is not something that's just exclusive to Phi Gamma Delta either. I mean, it's just a very, insuring fraternities have become very, very challenging. And, the carriers just have had a real hard time, especially on that excess layer where there's less people purchasing it and less premium that it produces to underwrite it profitably. So in those situations where we've had higher requirements, we've been successful in, working with the university and negotiating lower limits. And then Aaron had a question: do our own umbrella policies cover house corp members? They should. Most of them do. Will extend when you're working for a not-for-profit. If you ever do get individually sued, our recommendation is always to put every possible policy that could provide coverage on notice. I mean, the goal is that the fraternity's insurance coverage, is going to take the lead. They're going to defend you. They're going to get you a lawyer, and ultimately they're going to get you, released from the lawsuit once the settlement. Because before any settlement's paid, it's going to be inclusive of releasing all potential fraternity defendants.
Looks like we got one from
yep.
Mark.
Given declining, Mark asks, given declining revenue, a chapter may attempt to rent to non-Fiji member or rent out space for social events. What are the possible insurance exclusions for those? There really isn't any exclusions that would exclude you from doing that. I would, certainly, I think, having someone other than a member live at the facility to me is not, is not a huge deal. Certainly want to make sure that, they're not gonna, they don't come with baggage or problems there. I would look at closely kind of what you're doing with renting out those social events. I mean, if that is something that you elect to do, I would make sure that you have a user agreement that has favorable indemnification language for the house corporation, that it has insurance requirements of at least $1 million per occurrence, $2 million, and that you require that that rentor add the house corporation as an additional insured on a primary basis under that policy. So if you go that, I would probably really discourage you from doing that. But if you do go that route, that's definitely the steps that you want to take to, again, it kind of comes down to that T. Transfer can happen in an insurance policy, can also happen in a contract. And that's what we're really encouraging you there with the user agreement, is that we got transferred to that user of the facility. So great question. Thank you. Any others?
I would also add to that, if you're renting to non-Fiji members, is making sure that they have their own, renter's insurance as well, with some level of liability coverage on there as well. That way, in the event, something were to occur as a result of their, that tenant's negligence, there's, some protection on top of that.
And that's something good to even, to say to your undergraduate members that reside. I mean, everybody needs personal liability insurance. They need insurance to cover their own contents, because the property policies that are purchased by house corporations doesn't cover tenants' contents. So they have that, and they have, potential personal liability exposure that that's either going to come through the homeowner, a parent's homeowners, as long as they're considered a permanent resident and a relative of that household, or through a renter's in policy, which you could probably acquire for less than $150 a year.
Rich, Carson, I want to thank you both for your time. Brothers, if any other questions come up, I'll share both Rich's and Carson's contact information in a follow-up email. Feel free to email them directly or direct any questions to housing@phigam.org. As we go into our next educational breakout, brothers, we're going to be focusing on house corporation operations. So please use your conference program again to navigate the links. If you have any issues, please reach out to me directly, and I'll send you the information to join directly. But Rich, Carson, thank you both again for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Theo.